Okay, so today I want to go over the listing agreement and what to expect, when the agent comes out and some of the decisions that you'll have to make when listing your home. So, again, these forms do change from time to time, but really, most of the information in the form does not change. It's all the same concepts. So even if the form looks a little bit different at the time of signing it, it's going to have this general information in here. So obviously all sellers on title need to be on this agreement. If there's 3 sellers, 4 sellers, 5 sellers, if it's in a trust, whatever that information is, those legal names need to be on here, and all those parties do need to sign and execute this agreement to show that all sellers on title of the property are in agreement to sell. And then the broker's name goes here. In Nevada, by law, you have to have a start and an end date to every contract, so both of those have to be in here, whatever those dates are. Where the city is, this is the assessor's parcel number, and of course the address to the property. And now the listing price, how much is this home going to be listed at? When you actually do find a buyer, how much earnest money are you going to ask for? That's the money that they put into escrow, as good faith money to show that they're wanting to buy the house. We typically see this around 1%, but you can get more aggressive in certain markets or at different price points. But for this example, we'll put in the 1%. And then this is the type of financing that you are willing to accept as a seller from the buyer coming in. And so some of these will matter by loan amounts. FHA does not go anywhere near $600,000. So obviously, FHA at this time is around $327,000. So they would have to come in with a lot of extra cash. And it is possible then they could do the FHA loan, but it's not practical. So we wouldn't check that box in this example. But they could obviously pay cash. They could do a conventional loan, and they could do a VA loan. So you'll see that VA loans at this point really only go to $457,000, but there are certain lenders that actually have higher limits, and they can do a VA loan all the way to $600,000. They're specialty products by certain banks and lenders that can go above the traditional VA limits offered in each city. And if the owner is willing to carry any of the financing, that information would go here. These forms are also like for leasing or lease options. We don't personally do that. Now, does the seller authorize the disclosure of the existence of multiple offers? That's something that you have to agree upon in writing, if your agent is allowed to disclose that or not. Property offered for sale. This is personal property. So an item here, for instance, you have a shed, sitting in the backyard that could technically be removed. It just sits on a concrete slab. So, you don't want to have to move the shed. So you want to make sure that the new buyer gets that, because that could be an argument. Maybe it's, maybe it's a great shed and people really want it, or maybe it's a terrible shed and nobody wants it. So you don't want to move out of the house as a seller and be completely out, be in a new state. Then the buyer comes to do the final walkthrough and they're like, why is that shed still here? That's awful. We want that removed. So that we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page there. So these are the following items of personal property are excluded. So in this example, refrigerator, washer, dryer, and the light fixture in the formal dining room. So I want to take a minute though and talk about this. Some of the key things that comes through in the purchase agreement, which I have a different video recorded about that. There are a lot of items that are already included that are to be understood, that are included with the home. And the best way that I can really describe this is, if you have to use a tool to remove it, it is considered to be included. So like a ceiling fan or a water softener, surround sound speakers that are built into the ceiling, all that stuff is considered to be included. Now, a refrigerator, as an example, could be one of two ways. It could be a built-in refrigerator that is definitely included in the sale of the property. Now, if it is a refrigerator that you can pull out, and just use a pair of pliers to remove the water line, then that is not technically included. So that would have to be negotiated in the contract. So your agent is going to want to disclose that in the multiple listing service if you intend on leaving that refrigerator in the kitchen or not, if it is removable. Same thing with washer and dryer. Those are considered personal property. So you have to disclose if that's something that you want to give. And even though you say, no, I don't want to give the washer and dryer, if the buyer asks for it, then that becomes negotiable. And of course, you can stick to saying, no, you're absolutely not going to do it, and it is what it is. I do want to discuss this light fixture. So, I do go into properties and, speak with the seller, and they say, well, that light fixture is a family heirloom, and I absolutely want to keep that. It's not going anywhere under any circumstances. So the answer, at that point is to the seller is, well, go ahead and get that removed now. And, they'll, look at me and be like, well, I don't understand. We're not moving yet. And, it looks great there. And I said, yes, but the problem is we're misleading the buyer that beautiful light fixture is going to come with the house. And the problem is when they see it, they're going to want it. And even though this is a $600,000 house and you could probably replace that light fixture for $1,000, it could possibly become a really bad sticking point and blow the deal. So it's better just to remove anything that you do not want to give with the sale of the property in advance. So then that way it's not something to argue over. So now the next section here talks about leased or liened items that you have to let the agent know about. Obviously solar is starting to become pretty big out there nowadays, and you can either buy solar panels or you can lease them. So if there is a 15-year lease on that's a required lease payment that has to be disclosed. We see these other items like alarm system. Maybe you did a 3-year agreement with an alarm company to pay $60 a month and you're only 1 year into that. Many of those nowadays can just transfer with the seller to their new property. Other times they can't. So if there is a required set payments into the future, then that is considered a lease and has to be disclosed to the new buyer. Title insurance, it talks about that you will provide the buyer with an owner's policy. Compensation to the broker, so this is the commission. So I really like this form now. It's different than the forms that we've used in the past, and the reason is it clearly defines the commission, not only to the total commission, but also the amount that's going to be given to the buyer's agent. So as a seller, I've never seen a transaction where the seller does not pay for both agents. They pay for the listing agent and the buyer's agent. It's commission to both of them. So in this example, this says that a 6% commission is offered and a $500 flat fee amount, which is for the transaction fee. And that of that 6%, the seller acknowledges that the broker will offer 3% to the cooperating broker, which means to the one representing the buyer. So that would mean 3% to each agent in this example. The reason that this now is like this is this blank used to not be here, so they would say 6%, and then the listing agent would try to keep too much money, let's just say 4%, and only give 2% to the buyer's agent. And the problem with that example is now the buyer's agents aren't showing the house because they're not being fairly compensated, and the seller would be wondering why their neighbor's house is getting shown so much, but their house is not. So it's very important. I have a whole commission based on a whole video based on commission. It's very important to watch that video to understand that this number paying to the buyer's agent is also a fair number to make sure that your property gets shown and sold in a timely manner. The lease agreement. If you were doing a property management agreement, this would be applicable here. But this part up here is for the sale, this part is for a lease. Compensation shall be due. So this just talks about some boilerplate language here about pretty much protecting the broker. about, once the marketing is started on the property, that, they get time to actually sell the if they withdraw the listing agreement. And I'll give you kind of an example on some of this boilerplate language here. I've seen before in the market when a seller, signs a listing agreement, and then all of a sudden, the signs start popping up in the front yard and some video out there on the internet, and then all of a sudden you get a call from the seller and they say, hey, what if I had a friend that, or a neighbor that wanted to buy the house? And the broker says, well, why didn't you talk about that a week ago when you signed the listing agreement? Oh, well, they just came to me now. Well, the fact that they came to you now is because there's marketing being done. There's signs up in your front yard. And because of the broker's marketing efforts, that is why these people are now coming to you. So that's not fair to, now start bringing up, that you want a reduced commission if you bring the buyer, because the marketing efforts that the broker is doing is starting to pay off. So that's protecting the broker. Okay, so deposit broker, also authorized to accept on the seller's behalf a deposit. So this is talking about that earnest money, and there's many places that this money can go. Typically in the sale process, we see that go through escrow, but when it is a rental, then it will definitely go through the broker's accounts, not through the escrow, but on the sale side, it's escrow. Agency relationship. This is really just breaking down the fact that the listing agent is there to protect your interest, not to make themselves a commission, but they need to protect you in every way that they can, to make sure that they're selling your home for the most money in the least amount of time, and protecting your interest as the seller and not their own or the buyers. So required disclosures, we do have to give you something called a residential disclosure guide. And that's from the real estate division in Nevada, and it has, I think it's around 35 or 40 pages now, and just describes a lot of the terms and the process for selling and buying a home. A very informative guide. But it also talks about here how you have to, as a seller, fill out a seller's real property disclosure, and also a construction defect form. And if it's built to 78, then you have to do the lead-based paint. So I was just letting you know that all those forms are required to be filled out to give to the buyer. And here's some boilerplate language. I'll leave it here for a second. You can pause the video to read. Fair housing, quick touch on that is, as licensed agents, we're not allowed to discriminate against anybody. The answer to that is all money is green. So we have to sell the house to whoever wants to buy it, as long as they're offering the fair price for it. Common interest community. This is where we are having a discussion on what homeowners associations you have. And yes, we have seen up to 3 homeowners associations on a property. That's why there's 3 blanks here. And we have to talk about how much is the dues monthly or quarterly. We need to know how to get a hold of that homeowners association. And if the home does not have a homeowners association, then you simply mark that it is not located within one. And then we also have to know, are all the dues current in the homeowners association, or are you behind on those dues? Special assessments. So in Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas, we do see a lot of SIDs that run on the property here. So we have to say yes, that this property does have a SID on it, and the remaining balance is $6,500, and the payments are $640 annually to keep up on those SIDs. Sign, do you allow the listing agent, the broker, to put a sign in the front yard disclosing that the house is for sale? Sometimes gated subdivisions or guard gated have certain restrictions. Either no signs are allowed, or only certain sizes of signs, or a certain quantity, meaning you can't have 2 or 3 signs out there, just one. Key box, so this is the lock box, and that you do authorize the broker to install a lockbox, and whether it's electronic or mechanical. Really, the significance to this is a key box is really important because, as I tell my sellers, you want to know who is accessing that property. So electronic is very important because a mechanical is simply just a code, and if you put that code in the multiple listing service, any agent can go over there and you truly can't track it. So the electronic key box is superior because you can track every bit of activity that happens there. So it's very important that agents be able to access the lockbox and get the key out of it to get inside the house, to show their prospective buyers your home. And it's not a good idea for the seller to be there. I'll just say that this part of the listing agreement because buyers feel uncomfortable when sellers stay in the home. So it is important to put the key box on so that the buyers can feel comfortable and confident to stay in the property without anybody there. And anybody that can access these lock boxes or definitely has to be a licensed agent, so they've had background checks done and fingerprints done to be able to obtain their license. So now that we have something called one-day codes for lock boxes here, so it's one-day codes. So what this means is, as a listing agent, only the listing agent can authorize these. Let's just say that the home inspection happens and there's a plumber that needs to come over and fix something, but you work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and the plumber needs to come at 11 a.m. We can actually issue a one-day code for that plumber to get into the property to make that repair, to where they could open the lockbox, get in, and close it, with your approval. The other one-day codes might go to a photographer or to a stager, just different people that you authorize to get into the property, that we can send them this code electronically. And it only when it is very specific, it is 1 day. So that code is valid for, let's just say, that Tuesday. And if they were to try to get back into the property on Wednesday or Thursday, that code would not work anymore. It's a pretty cool feature. And then this talks here about, a rental or lease. Do you have a tenant in the property right now? Is there a lease agreement that's going on in the state of Nevada? If you are going to sell your home and that tenant living in there still has a 6-month lease agreement still going into the future, we have to honor that. That lease agreement is very powerful for that tenant. So we'd have to sell the property subject to somebody buying it with that existing lease agreement. Tax withholding. You can read through this here, but we have to declare if you're subject to FERPTA or not, if you're a U.S. taxpayer. Otherwise, a certain amount of money has to be withheld at the sale. Mediation. So this is between you, the seller, and the broker. And what this pretty much means is, if there is a problem, say you're not happy with the way that the listing is going, whether it be the marketing or their communication with you, and you decide that you want to cancel the listing agreement, that if everybody agrees to this, rather than getting attorneys involved or judges or some sort of lawsuits, that they will go down to Greater Las Vegas Association of Realtors and sit with a neutral third party called a mediator and get that person's feedback to see who might be in the wrong or the right, try to get the issue resolved. And that person, of course, would say, yes, I feel that the listing agreement should be canceled, or no, they're doing their job, they're upholding what they said they would do. Multiple listing service, that is one of the major systems that we use in the real estate business, that you want to participate, in that system to get that out to all the licensed realtors in the greater Las Vegas area. So the next section is important. It talks about advertising, a lot of what's going to happen with the property going out on the internet with pictures and video, and do you want to block any of that? And then the seller is allowed to opt out, on certain sections of the advertising part, the commentary section, the automated estimate of value, or cannot opt out of anything. So definitely read over those to see if any of those stand out, that you're not excited about the marketing portion. And then use of the listing content. Obviously there's pictures taken of the house, And this is going to be put out, disseminated out to many, many places, whether it be brochures, internet, other agents. So it's just letting you know, all those places that that's going to be disseminated to, and that we are allowed to do that. Here's some other boilerplate language that you could read through. All of this. Pause the video if you need to. So obviously you're warranting here that you're the owner of the property. And foreclosure. So we need to know when we're listing the property if the property has had a notice of default filed, or foreclosure if it's going to auction. It's we can't stop the sale of a property if the payments haven't been being made. All we can do is sell a property that has clear and equitable title that can actually be sold. So in other words, if your home is going to go to auction in 30 days and we find a buyer in 2 weeks, and then they're going to take 30 days to close, we can't stop the sale of that house. So that doesn't mean that you can't work with a judge or an attorney in the background and get that stopped, so that, because we actually have a sale pending, but for the most part we cannot stop that sale. And just signatures that a lot of times we can use electronic signatures or fax. They don't necessarily have to be wet signatures. And that this is a lot of boilerplate language. I don't want to take too much time to go over all this. You can just pause the video and read it. One of the things I always put in additional terms here is a seller to remove all padlocks on the property prior to home inspection. It never fails. A lot of owners forget, all the padlocks that they've got on the electrical panels, the gates, the attics, the pool stuff, this and that. And when the inspector gets there, they can't check out a lot of stuff that's important throughout the inspection process. So just a reminder there. Then of course, it'll have all the broker information and the seller's information. Everybody has to sign the agreement. The licensee's information would have to be disclosed here, just to prove that they are a licensee. And then one other thing that's part of the listing agreement is the Fair Housing Act, and that's pretty much again saying that we cannot restrict who we sell this home to. All buyers' money is green, so it doesn't matter any of their background or anything like that. We cannot discriminate. We need to sell the property as long as they're willing to pay the price that you're offering your property for sale. So I hope this helps you in regards to the listing agreement, so that you can kind of better understand all the clauses and everything in here before we come out and meet with you. Thanks for watching. This is Tom Huser with the Huser team.